As we talk about key learnings specific to this and the previous hackathon with Bryce and other hackathons that are ongoing, something that is complex and confusing for me to keep track of, and I live and breathe in this space, is the types of tests, what the benefits are, and which one do you select as one versus the other when you're talking about tissue management, cost, turnaround time. So if we're going to try to take the key learnings to share with patients moving forward or families, we need to make it easier because there's so many amazing tools and technologies and tests, but they all are presented by a brand name and there's no grid or anything as to where there's overlap, where there's differentiation, what's accessible, what the challenges are. So I think when you get to this situation where it's a dire situation, it's a relapse, it's an aggressive cancer, it's not responding to treatment, and you need to make these decisions. We have had an amazing SWAT team of people trying to piece this together. And the reality is that's not scalable for the individual patient or person. But if we can take all of that wisdom that we've compiled in these calls and create even just an infographic that can be shared widely, and that is tumor agnostic, and that is a patient decision support tool. So physicians have clinical decision support tools and patients don't have enough of them. And this isn't your a common gripe that I hear from patients and families is that the disease specific and diagnosis specific stuff that they get in their booklets from advocacy groups and things, they're very basic. You get to a point where you're way past that. And people are hungry and desperate for the sophisticated stuff. They want the personalized medicine. We're pushing personalized medicine from immunotherapy and pushing into trials, but there's nothing to help guide. And how do you get to those trials? So you need these tests. So I guess in a nutshell, let's see if we can make it easier. I'd be happy to be a part of it and contribute, but we have so many amazing companies here. We need to collaborate and literally create a spectrum. Where do you fall on the spectrum? How do you get your test and kind of work from there? That would be my 2 cents.
Are you
That was very eloquent. Very eloquent.
Yeah, well done.
Yeah, I would add to Grace that it's not just informing patients, informing providers who are overwhelmed with the diagnostic tests, including lab-developed tests versus, CLIA-approved tests and all kinds of things. So it helps providers as much as patients and their care partners. I was actually going to go back to the note from Linnea, though. They said that she applied for compassionate use. Was that the Turning Point medication that she got?
That's my understanding.
Is that what you think it is?
The way I read it is Jess Lynn has gotten access, has requested and gotten compassionate use access to Turning Point, which would, I believe, also allow her to control the dosing, which was a concern.
I reached out to their chairman yesterday, though, or CEO, just to see if we needed to navigate in. So I haven't heard back yet, but
yeah.
Right.
Well, one of Sophia's colleagues, I don't think she's on this call.
She'll join us at the end. Robin is.
Yeah. Noted that this same drug is available in New Jersey, and did Linnea want to travel to New Jersey, get started on it there, and then when it showed up at MGH, just swap over to do it at MGH. But it sounds like it's like that the sword went through the Gordian knot, and Jess Lynn has cut through all that to get access.
Although
which takes all that work we did on the bridging strategy and just kind of like, well, you don't have to do that. Just get to this as fast as possible. And the other part was, it sounds like they're going to put her back on the same SHIP2 trial in the intervening 3 to 5 weeks before they can get her on the Turning Point drug.
Yeah, but I agree with Grace. She just posted something. You can do this by phone. I sent that FDA link yesterday. 4 to 5 weeks isn't acceptable. If it's an emergency situation, the FDA will approve compassionate use over the phone.
Exactly.
So I'm not sure that we can influence it, but I don't find 4 to 5 weeks acceptable.
I agree.
I think this is another thing this group can highlight for the benefit of all patients. Like 4 to 5 weeks in an emergency situation and being hit with that roadblock, just like most people couldn't work their way around that. And it's just like not acceptable, but, oh, it just pains me.
But they have a phone process. The FDA has a specific process to how to do it by phone, over the phone. So, and I know healthcare, Grace and I have talked about this, still works by fax too, but you know, we're not working by snail mail.
I would remind people also that pharmaceutical companies inevitably have a similar process by which a request can be made for a drug. And I serve on a ethics board for Roche and heard any number of times it is probably about a 98% agreement for the patient. If there's any decent argument to be made for use of a drug that would be available, perhaps only otherwise through trial, or certainly after a trial is ended and the patient still needs that drug. So that and the FDA, it's a good record to call upon.
Okay. It sounds like something I should put in a text to Linnea. Again, since we don't have access to her oncologist, I think we have to go via Linnea on that. Kimmery, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I guess going back to Will's point and taking some of the learnings and just sort of thinking about how to frame things moving forward. You know, I had the fears and concerns that we're living right now in my mind the whole time, and that's maybe because I've worked a lot in lung cancer, and I know how fast things can happen. And I also, I mean, just in the last couple of years, I lost both an aunt and an uncle very rapidly to lung cancer shortly after their known diagnosis with it. So, you know, that was sort of always my concern. And I think that raises the point of kind of maybe making sure we understand a little bit the epidemiology or the natural history of the course of whichever tumor type we're talking about in a particular hackathon. And then, so that's just, I guess, just a comment, because it speaks to the timeline and again, back to my kind of pragmatic, like at the end of the day, the oncologist is going to call the shots. So, you know, we can come up with a lot of really great ideas, but they're going to call the shots in the end. The other thing is that just the hackathon itself, like, I mean, when I first joined, you know, I guess my understanding was it was really about kind of putting options on the table with some, you know, scientific backing, and was really about that, like helping navigate through tissue testing and treatment options. But does the hackathon also want to extend itself into some of these other areas about care? Because we're talking about, you know, proxies and, you know, medical release and things like that. And I think, should there be a line? Should there be, I mean, I don't think there's much a group like us can do remotely as strangers to sort of step in on Linnea's behalf and advocate with her to her physicians. I think this is probably too remote of a format to be able to do that. Although it's, you know, if individuals step forward and want to get that involved, I think that's cool. And this is a crowd from which to draw that type of support. But whether or not the hackathon is a complete sort of soup to nuts, you know, I think is something that we should discuss as a group as well.
So my thinking's evolved on that just in the last few days. And I think what we should be able to do is to describe the ideal team structure. So if you're the patient, you should have these kinds of resources, these kinds of backups. So whether the hackathon is drawing a line somewhere about its responsibility, I think is a valid point. We should consider that. But certainly we should stand for the success of the patient and make sure the patient has in place the things that, I guess the common thing in these to me is that patients get diagnosed out of the blue. Stuff happens and they're unprepared. They have no background in it. And at least people like yourself or Grace or others will have seen the trajectories and then can anticipate the things that you're going to need. And I think that's part of what you're saying. And to be that wisdom for the patient who's like in terra incognita, like I've never seen this map before. but others have seen this map, have been on this similar journeys before, and can provide that wisdom to them so that they navigate and make the right, choose the right path. Erica, did you want to say something?
No.
Nope. Okay. Peggy, go ahead.
I have been thinking about this too, because later today I fly to see an elderly relative who probably needs a complete review of her medical record. She's got a son who is wonderful and lovely, but has no idea about medical. So, and I see this with what we talked about with Linnea, where she has friends who are helpful and good, but there's no one person that I understand, it, I could be wrong, who could look at the medical recommendations and feel comfortable that come from here, or some ideas, or to even speak with her several doctors and say, have we thought about this? Where is the test that related to that? It seems like a person needs both what I've called the TLC party in there who can make decisions, versus somebody who can help perhaps that individual speak to the doctors on the patient's behalf. It's a huge task. We've all talked about it, but we need, there needs to be a way to, I think, kind of have a double team, what I will call the emotional support side, and then the medical discussion side. You don't expect the dear sister to handle everything when she's also devastated by bad news and has no idea, no different really than the patient too often. I don't know quite the answer.
Thank you, Peggy. Anyone else?
Yeah, I think it is a hybrid of the scientific side, which is where there's great expertise that can be brought to bear specifically, then also a roadmap. All right, so your parent, child, partner, whoever has a diagnosis of this. And if you're then going to be the one going through that with them, in support of them, then here's what you need to think about. Are you the advocate? Are you the one going to manage the consents documents, all the essentially the bureaucratic side of things, so that the patient is managing him or herself, and then there are essentially bifurcations along this roadmap that says, okay, here's what next cytotoxic therapy, what targeted agents make sense, what kind of tests would be relevant for this diagnosis versus this diagnosis versus this diagnosis. And that's where the scientific expertise within the hackathon comes through, essentially personalizing it. But to give people a map, a roadmap, or a structure to say, okay, this is what we need to think about, whether they're interfacing with the medical oncologist, but then that's not the only person. There's the assistants and there's other people in the staff, and how do they manage their own path specimen to make sure that it gets where it needs to go if they're sending it out for, say, chemosensitivity testing versus genomics or proteomics. All of those have different requirements, and some of them have very, very small time windows. And there's not a lot of, that I see, opportunities for people to get that information reliably right at the beginning, so that they have some sort of management of their expectations. And that doesn't mean we're providing those advocates. We don't have to necessarily in the hackathon provide who's going to go get the consents and who's going to shepherd, or I like someone brought up the term, who's going to be the Sherpa for the pathology specimens. But the fact that the people who are supporting the patient know that this is a set of relevant considerations that need to be managed, that's a great educational tool. Maybe it's a video. Maybe it's a series of videos. I don't know, but it would really be helpful in a patient-centered way. And the scientific precision that we individually could bring to bear in a hackathon, that's hybridized within it. I don't see that they're dependent on one another.
So this is a product of cancer101.org, which is in the business of educating people who are recently diagnosed with cancer. And so there are people, and they're not the only ones doing this. There are people, this is from Sarah Krug, if anyone knows her. There are a number of services that provide that kind of, you've just been diagnosed, how do you get your head around it and get educated for those who want to. I think Grace was quite correct. We're dealing with the stuff that's beyond that. These are the complex decisions where people have been through that kind of basic one-on-one education. I think it's also true that the NCCN guidelines are pretty good, for standard of care and for letting people understand what clinical trials are and to understand their disease. So we would want to stand on the shoulders of that and not replicate any of that, but rather take it to the next level. And I think the issue is that when you get into personalization, it becomes very specific. So even the tests, that I think about that Bryce Olson was using for prostate cancer, different than the test, which was a PSMA PET, is different than the test you would use for non-small cell lung cancer. Every cancer has different biomarkers and different tests that tell you how you're progressing with your disease. So to make something that's both generalized and specific is a real conundrum, a real paradox. But I do think that we have wisdom, knowledge that we want to pass on again to those who would follow in the path that the people like Linnea have blazed. And we should talk more about this. How do we do that? How do we create a health learning system? How do we create resources for people who are going down these paths? And even a pointer to cancer101.org and the NCCN guidelines might be a dramatic service to 80% of the people who encounter this. Any other thoughts? Any other comments? We will have another session that will be a post-mortem, but I feel like we need to let Linnea's situation play a bit more to confirm where she's at. I will send her, as I said, I will send her a text message saying, as you did, Grace, that 4 to 5 weeks is unacceptable and there's a way to get it much faster than that. Is there anything else that's like urgent that we should do like that? Grace, go ahead.
Brad, I'm just really concerned with that time frame. We don't have weeks. I mean, we need to talk hours and days here for Linnea. This has to get pushed through. I mean, she said in her post, she has to stay alive until then, until this gets approved. I mean, how much more burden can you put on a human being? This has to be escalated to. So I don't know. I'm not familiar with this custom dosing paperwork approval process. There must be a process for getting this approved for the custom dosing portion. Jeff, I don't know if you know about that, what that entails, but
I know someone who can tell us.
so how, and is it that the doctor only has so much time and she needs time to fill this out and get it approved through the hospital and then submitted? So what can we do to help? Because we can't let it go on that long. I mean, she's suffering.
Well, two things. Like I said, I reached out to the CEO of Turning Point, so I'll follow up on that. The second thing is the woman is at a company in the UK called BioEmass. Her name is Naomi Litchfield. She's an expert only in compassionate use. That's what she focuses on. So I'm even though she's British, she understands. She just produced a summary of the compassionate use programs for the whole world by country. Oddly enough, it doesn't include the US, but I can send that. It's a big 150-page PDF. But I can reach out to Naomi in a heartbeat, and maybe we could set up a call on Monday or something if we want to do that. But I agree with Grace wholeheartedly on this. I think we need to push if we can. And I know we have to go through this Jess Lynn or whatever her name is and Linnea, but let me try to see if I can connect with the Turning Point people.
So Jeff, wasn't it you last week that sent a link? I mean, there is a 24-hour, like an emergency. These are single patient INDs is what they're called.
Absolutely they are. And you can do it. There's a section on the I sent the link last week. I sent again. The FDA has a section on how to do it by phone in an emergency situation. There's a specific set of procedures for an emergency compassionate use authorization.
So yeah, I'm a little shocked that her doctors aren't considering that.
Do they know of it?
They have.
They
Not
have
me.
to, but
Well,
I'm
but
not a
they think-
clinical person, as you know, but I'm a pushy person.
But to play devil's advocate, Linnea's one patient out of how many patients that they may have who also may be in dire circumstances. So I think if we can convey the message that we want to help and would be willing to help and what can we do,
Yeah.
that's the best that we can do right now.
Yeah.
I don't know how much we can help though, because these are documents that have to be filled out by the physician. And that's why they don't often do this, because it really is, they pretty much have to drop everything and work on this. And they've got, you know, a patient caseload that they have to take care of, right? So, you know, but that's where, like, if I were the proxy, I'd be hounding the physicians do this, and, you know, and I would literally just ride them to do it. I've been known to follow people around in hospitals myself. So.
is
I
there
can already-
anyone at Linnea's side who can be that kind of personality or proxy or, you know, nudge to get this done? That's what worries me, is that there's no one clear person at her side who can follow through.
Yeah.
Yeah, this has been very opaque, Peggy. There's a named person, Melinda Lee,
Right.
but it's like she's segregating her life. Like there's family and friends, and then there's the hackathon. And so what, again, just to reiterate something we said at the top of the presentation, it's only in this stress situation, a sort of crisis situation, that we realize that the disintegration, the fact that we're not bound at the hip to just Lynn, has become a
Yeah,
failure point.
Well, or it's a decision. I mean, Linnea may want that separation.
Yeah.
And that's how I'm interpreting it.
Yeah, agreed. No, she's segregating those things intentionally. And so we don't have the kind of access and ability to offload and support that we might be willing to do, but she's making that choice.
Right.
So Kimmer, I wanted to follow up to your point. I think it's profound what you say, is that there may not be anything that we can do, but I think thinking bigger on how this can help other patients, having a copy of that paperwork, which should be a public document, I would imagine, literally having a copy of it, understanding, are there multiple sections, who signs those sections? A person, if a family was doing this, they would have to hunt down, you know, the physician's assistant or, you know, the privacy office or the patient experience or whoever's running the clinical trials to sign these. And you almost need to create a checklist of who do you go now? What if somebody's out of the office? What if someone's on summer vacation? Who's the point person? So that's where I see from a process standpoint that maybe we could help, but I don't know if we can, to your point, at this moment with this person right now.
A group to highlight that might be good partners to us in the future is Triage Cancer. They specialize in the legal considerations surrounding cancer care, everything from insurance billing to disability to, I imagine, consent management. And so Joanna is just a terrific lawyer based in DC, and this is her nonprofit. They might be really strong partners to build some of these resources that we're talking about and to have the legal expertise to make sure that we're navigating it accurately and correctly. So an idea we can kind of chase down in the,
I would appreciate that. I've been waiting for that to emerge, Sophia. Like we've identified a clear need and a weakness and a breakdown. And so it's like, I'm leaning on the crowd in the same way we do. I'm waiting for someone to emerge saying, oh, I know how to do those consents. They're patient friendly and they basically achieve the outcomes we want. And they're an alternative for the patient to sign instead of signing the ones that come from the researchers in the hospital. So yeah, and those must exist. They must be kind of open source. They must be, because everybody, this is a standard thing. And I'm humbled by the fact that there are experts. The article that Gail Thornton shared, Gail's on this call, from 2006, I was just reading this morning, Sunday New York Times, and it was going over these legal cases that have gone through where, no, you don't own your tissue. And, you know, and the institution does all that, all those issues, like, but somebody's specialized in this area. So I'm just waiting for, I hope that this is the answer, because to date, no one has emerged saying I'm a trained lawyer and I'm patient-centered, and these are the templates you can use.
I know that's what they do for all the legal considerations. So oh, it looks like Peggy's also.
Well, I just quickly put triage cancer up and, you know, quick guides and so on and so forth. This is, apparently they've done a lot of things like this that are beyond what I would call the standard patient toolkit or the welcome to breast cancer kind of stuff. So this is something I think we could all benefit from looking at. I certainly will be for my kidney cancer world, which patients can fall apart quickly. So triagecancer.org if anybody else is interested. And then with scientific advocacy, which I'm interested to follow through on. Love that resource already.
Anyone else?
I got to run, Brad, but
Okay.
let's stay in touch. And I just sent a note to Grace. I'm going to connect her with the woman who's the expert in the compassionate use. She needs to know her anyway, I said.
Okay, great.
All right. Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Sorry, I got to
You
run.
too. Right, bye.
Just in managing expectations, it's not easy to say with patients, but in the group to understand when I'm talking with other physicians who may not be as familiar with the progression of cancer, I'll use some terms that are easier to visualize. That biology is often on an S curve, and when we're at the shoulder, it's not so steep. But once we start to go down the increasing steepness, then it moves quickly. It's exponential, and that can be anticipated if her malignant, if her tumor burden is not reducing or not stable, then the progression is more likely to be logarithmic or exponential than linear. Knowing that, it's not something that a lot of people are eager to explicitly discuss with the patient or the patients are actually asking for, but it can help in understanding planning processes. And it's one of the reasons I often advocate for people to prepare options in parallel rather than sometimes the oncology team will say, well, let's just wait a while and we'll re-image in 3 months and then we'll see what to do next.
That's a great point. Great point. I have a slow growing lymphoma, and my oncologist is always saying, well, if something shows up, we'll have plenty of time to deal with it. And that's not the case. I've learned now for Linnea's situation. And knowing that, I think that was Grace's point, or maybe Kimberly's point, knowing that going in would influence and say, therefore we need the crisis resources that we can just call on in a heartbeat to deal with something, because things could change real fast. We need to be able to move fast to respond. Anyone else before we wrap today? Great.
Brad, instead of using the word postmortem, whenever we wrap a project or a study, we call them retros.
Yeah.
Like retrospective.
Yeah.
So that could be it. We could do a retro.
Yeah. As I said, after action review is another name. I actually grew up in the lean tradition. They actually have there's a Toyota production system Japanese name for it. They call it Hansei, but it's all reflection. It's all looking back and trying to figure out what worked and what didn't work. But it's all the same thing. We'll stay away from postmortem. Okay. Thanks, everyone. I guess the best way to stay tuned is to watch Linnea's blog, because it seems like she's updating there, and we'll try to do what we can in the meantime. Otherwise, I'll see you in a week. Thanks.